So I'm just reading what she wrote. So.
Or something else.
And Mr. Yates is a member of Eastman Smith Limited Labor and Employment Practice Group. He represents public and private sector employers in all facets of labor and employment law. And he conducts employee training and gives his presentation and written articles on numerous issues impacting the workplace, including minimizing wage and hour law. So, and he's going to talk about this new law tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
This is just like my home. We have a party and everyone just stays around the island in the kitchen and I can't usher them to the other rooms. And that's usually where the booze is kept too, right? So we know the reason that people are over there. So I'm gonna try not to be, sometimes when I present, I'm doing like 3 hours on this stuff. So please. You're gonna need a lot of booze if I'm doing 3 hours on independent contracting. If you listen to the lawyer talk about independent contracts. And I'm the only person between the presentation on the freestanding bathtubs too, which I know is what you're all here for, not the independent contractor.
Another 3 hours, I'm just saying.
Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about developments in independent contracting. This is, believe it or not, one of the biggest issues for employers out there in terms of a high-risk issue. These wage and hour issues, the misclassifying independent contractors is, I think, the highest labor and employment risk out there. They're virtually uninsurable. So, and what's going on here is, just to give you a little bit of context, the wage and hour, the administrator of the wage and hour, the Federal Wage and Hour Division is increasingly skeptical, isn't really the right word, hostile toward independent contractors, okay? So he and the wage and hour folks don't like independent contractors. Why? What's going on? Why wouldn't they want independent contractors? Well, employers would be paying employee-related taxes if they were employees, not independent contractors. So the government's not getting their cut for independent contractors, right? So there's no workers' comp premiums being paid in, there's no unemployment premiums being paid in, the IRS isn't getting their cut. So, and unions can't organize independent contractors, so they also are very hostile toward independent contractors. So the Department of Labor Wage and Hour Administrator is also going after what he considers inappropriate, what he calls the buzzword that he uses and has been using, is fissuring. Fissuring means dividing up projects into little parts. Instead of, like in the old days, maybe you had one GC and then had the GC had a lot of employees on the job. Now we have a GC that subs to a sub, 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 and there's a bunch of material men on the job. And the wage and hour folks, the federal government believes that that is pushing wages down and creating price pressure so that folks aren't getting either minimum wages, they're independent contractors, or the benefits that they're entitled to, being covered by workers' compensation insurance, unemployment insurance. That's what all this is coming toward. So, so you have the Wage and Hour Division saying, we don't want people to be exempt from the Fair Labor Standards Act, from minimum wage and overtime provisions. We want more people to be non-exempt so they get hourly wages. We want higher minimum wages, right? So that's going to be a huge debate that we're having, and that's a subject of the next presentation, right? Because we're seeing the fight for 15 out there when people are leaving the restaurants and striking for 15 bucks an hour. And the other little bit of bad news for most of you all in here is that we are going to have another minimum wage constitutional amendment on Ohio's ballot in 2016. So that'll be out there. So you have more people, the Department of Labor wants more people to be employees, not independent contractors, and they want to raise those wages up. And the theory is you're going to raise the wages up for the lower wage workers and have to pay them all minimum wages, and then you're paying higher wages, plus you're paying into the government's coffers some more, okay? So that's the theory. Let's talk about independent contractors a little bit. Oh, by the way, this is the coolest showroom ever. Can everyone agree? There's this thing called the Urban Cultivator over there. Did anyone see that? I thought I was supposed to be doing like a presentation on marijuana on issue 3 or something. I was doing those a couple weeks ago, but the Urban Cultivator's growing like little plants and stuff, and it's like an urban garden over. You gotta check that thing out. I've never seen that before in my life. So this, what we're talking about is individuals that are on a work site, that are working, that are independent contractors, and the government thinks, this is the Department of Labor Wage and Hour Administrator, he's the sheriff, and he thinks that most of these independent contractors are misclassified, that they should really be employees. They used to think that it was 40% were misclassified actually, and they went and the Wage and Hour Division a few years ago hired a bunch of high-priced attorneys, very good attorneys, and to work for the government to root out this issue. This has been a huge point of emphasis for him. One of these cases is filed like every day around the country, okay? Huge damages potentially, and big money, not only in terms of damages, but the money is all the taxes that these government agencies are all for this because, you know, they get their tax money. And frankly, if people are mischaracterizing folks as independent contractors, it does create a competitive disadvantage for the people that are doing the project down the street that are actually properly classifying those people as employees and paying all their taxes and everything. So the people that are doing it wrong are gaining a competitive advantage. So this is a huge risk for businesses today. So really, I call it sort of the perfect storm because employers or companies want to outsource more of their labor these days. So there's been that sort of a trend. Some employers are like, look, I'll just outsource this operation. I'll hire temps. I'll get around the requirements of the Affordable Care Act. I don't want to deal with unemployment compensation. I don't want to deal with workers' comp. I don't want to deal with union. So I'll outsource this part of this job or this job. So you have the employers doing that on the one hand, and then on the other hand, the government really coming after employers or companies for misclassifying these folks. So Department of Labor now thinks that most, and is telling us, they believe that most independent contractors are misclassified. Unions obviously are pushing for enforcement because independent contractors can't be organized. They're not employees under the National Labor Relations Act. And this is scary for all employers. There's unprecedented information sharing now between like the state taxation department, state, the workers' compensation department, unemployment, and also the feds, Wage and Hour Division, and the NLRB and OSHA. So they're all buddies now and they all share information, which usually spells bad news. This is something we really need to pay attention to because the Department of Labor anymore, in the old days when I was a baby lawyer, we used to actually be able to go to the Wage and Hour Division of the Department of Labor when we had a question and say, boy, we're representing this employer, it's a close call on this, we really want some guidance on this, we want an administrative opinion on this. So we used to be, whether it was an exemption issue, how to pay somebody, whether or not this time was hours worked or not, and we used to be able to get administrative opinions. We haven't been able to get those for a decade, okay? So they don't issue those anymore. They don't issue guidance anymore. So when the wage and hour administrator comes out in July of this year and says, you know what, we're gonna issue some guidance on this independent contractor issue, and we're gonna go through an issue. It was a lengthy memo, and what this comes down to on the independent contractor side is, are these individuals economically dependent on somebody like Steve for their wages, or are they truly, in quote, in business for themselves? And in the guidance they went, and they cited a bunch of decisions over the last, really 50 years on this issue, but they didn't cite anything, really, that would make individuals employees, or independent contractors under the test. They all picked and chose and cited stuff that would tend to make most of these individuals employees, and then it concluded that, hey, most of these employees are going to be individuals. One of the examples that they used were drywallers. So that drywaller shows up at a job site and was classified as an employee for a while, but then all of a sudden find themselves classified as an independent contractor. If that individual is getting a W-2 for part of the year and 1099 for the other part of the year, they're sharing this information, that is a red flag for them. They specifically said in their example that that drywaller should really be classified as an employee, and this stuff all came about in 1997 in the Microsoft case. So you had Microsoft actually entering into independent contractor arrangements with folks that were working from home, and they signed the document and said, yeah, I'm an independent contractor. And then Microsoft said, yeah, you're doing software stuff and everything. We agree, we all agree you're an independent contractor. Well, then these employees realized what happened with Microsoft, the stock took off. So these employees then later said, boy, I kind of look like an employee, not an independent contractor, even though I signed this agreement, and the courts ultimately agreed with the employee. So this is where this whole notion of reclassifying or misclassification came about, because these employees won the Microsoft case, they became instant millionaires because they got stock options as employees that they would not have gotten as independent contractors. So Department of Labor doesn't care if you have these written agreements, and employees can't say, I'm an independent contractor, I signed something that said I was an independent contractor, or I signed, something in blood, or I'm just an intern or a volunteer. They can't waive their rights under the Fair Labor Standards Act, so that doesn't work either. This is the one thing that I was talking with Sherry about earlier today that should really scare us, and this is something we can actually do something about, because this is just proposed legislation, just recently proposed legislation, and this is a bill that's out there in Ohio that would have a uniform definition of who's an independent contractor and who's an employee. And that would be used for purposes of Ohio workers' compensation, for Ohio unemployment compensation, and it would be consistent with the IRS definition. All these departments have their own definitions of who's an employee and who's an independent contractor, okay? And so we want consistency. That's great for us. The problem with that is it sets up the administrator of the Bureau of Workers' Compensation as the sheriff in my other slide, as the enforcer, to go after employers who mischaracterize folks as independent contractors, and it provides for civil, and in some cases, if you violate it more than once, criminal penalties. It goes all the way up to a first-degree felony if you misclassify folks as independent contractors. And the BWC administrator enforces this. This isn't the courts that are making a determination. This is someone who's in an appointed position that is under this proposed statute, enforcing the law, and this should really scare us. if the BWC administrator, after an investigation, has reasonable cause to believe that someone is misclassifying folks, they have to issue a stop order on the job until the company can make an argument and actually either pay the fine or and remedy the situation, or sort of prove, I guess, their innocence. This is highly, highly unusual stuff. So $5,000 penalty per day if you violate the stop work order. Again, criminal and civil penalties. So this is something that's out there that I think you need to get with your legislative folks. And this is a great organization. I know Sherry will be on all over this, and get with some of the sponsors of this and tell them that you have some real serious concerns about the administrator of the Bureau of Workers' Compensation coming in and being able to investigate this and actually stop work orders. So it's crazy in my mind. So creating a whole new bureaucracy to do this stuff, and the stuff that they can do is very similar to what OSHA can do under the statute. They can come in to your workplace and inspect your workplace, get your business records. They have subpoena powers. That is scary to me. So think about you being on a job site and someone files a complaint saying they think they were improperly classified as an independent contractor. What kind of problems that could cause for the whole job, okay? So I just wanted to add some humor in this, I guess, and that some lessons in independent contracting, what not to do, and to show that these are big issues, big deal issues. September 22nd, $15 million settlement for Rick's Cafe for misclassifying exotic dancers as independent contractors. You know, the club was setting the terms or conditions of these dancers. You know, how long they have to dance, how long the song can be, how many songs, how much they can charge for a lap dance. So they were found to be employees. 15 million bucks. So these are big dollar issues. So how do we minimize it? Construction industry is has a bullseye on it with the Department of Labor. Exotic dancers, obviously. Trucking, janitorial, restaurant business. The restaurant business is not going to be too happy this year because they're going to be upset with the proposed increase of minimum wages too. So they're actually proposing to phase out the tipped employee exemption in this new proposed minimum wage. So $12 an hour is what's going to be on the ballot. So the factors are that the only thing that the Department of Labor cares about is this. Are the individuals economically dependent on the employer, or are they in business for themselves? So, the factors, these are traditional factors where the service is an integral part of the employer's business. If you're installing cabinets, and that's what someone's doing, and your business is installing cabinets, that's not an ancillary issue. That's an integral part of the employer's business. It's not like, we have some pizza making clients, and the pizza manufacturers are hiring people to do the landscaping. Okay, that's an independent contractor. They're not making pizzas. Here, if you have people that are actually doing things that are an integral part of your business, that looks more like an employee. Is the relationship temporary, ongoing? The Department of Labor says, yeah, we look at that, but we really don't care because even if the stuff is seasonal, we just care about if they're working most of the season. They don't care about the fact that they don't work the other part of the season. So how much equipment does the actual individual have? The more equipment they have, the more likely it is that they're an independent contractor. But the Department of Labor is telling us in this recent guidance they really don't care about that either too much. That isn't dispositive of the issue. You know, who controls the work. So these are the things that you have to watch out for. I think I've gone beyond my time. So.
I will post that on our website.
Yeah, so at least you have a checklist here, and at least I've flagged the issue, so when you hear about it, you can, you know, maybe this will trigger some of this, and watch out for that the new Ohio law. I'm sure Sherry will get on that. That just doesn't, I mean, it doesn't make sense.
Not to extend this too long, let me just ask you one thing that's probably on a lot of their minds. You know, when a contractor does a room addition, many of them use many subs. An electrician, because it has to be state licensed, a licensed plumber, all of those things. Those are all integral to getting that addition done.
Yeah, so the question is, we're using subs all the time. We're using the electrician, the plumber, we're using those, and those folks have specialized skills. And in the old days, we used to say, yeah, folks with specialized skills, those people are independent contractors. So we still think that they're independent contractors. We still think we can make them independent contractors. We should probably have some document that at least shows why we think they're independent contractors. But in the real world, we probably don't, right? The Department of Labor's guidance actually talks about that issue and says, yeah, some of these carpenters seem to be skilled workers. The plumbers, electricians, yeah, those are traditionally skilled workers, but that doesn't settle the issue. What the issue is, are they using these special skills and actually using that toward being in business for themselves? Are they using that and then also having some business initiative? So if you go to the plumber and say, look, plumbing, here we go, you know, go ahead and do it. This is what's in the room. This is what's going to be in there. Go ahead and take care of it. Plumb it. So they can order their own supplies. They can schedule their own work. You know, those types of things are still going to be important for the special. But we can't. No longer can we say, electrician, yeah, independent contractor. But typically, the electrician and the plumbers are working for a bunch of people, not just us anyway. So that helps us that way. But you know, sometimes if the plumber is just working for us, and that's all they do is stuff for us, and we direct that work, then you get closer to the line, you gotta watch out. So, thank you. On to the bathtub.
Thank you, that was very helpful.